Is this the most brutal thing Godzilla has ever done? Or this? Or this? The fatalities have become a staple part of the MonsterVerse, with its opponents being defeated in all sorts of gruesome and imaginative ways. And the king of the monsters has fought even more terrifying monstrosities. So today, we're going to find out which is the most brutal execution.
Fatality.
And some of this list may surprise you. We'll be judging this list based on how much they suffered to conclude which is the most savage. We've got 7 deadly titans with 7 gruesome deaths today, so let's break them down. Starting off the list at number 7, we have the execution of Titanus Tiamat. Godzilla, on the search for a greater source of radiation to evolve to his next most powerful form, swam all the way to the Arctic Ocean to fight the Serpentine Titan to claim the right to her home. The two engaged in a vicious battle where Tiamat bites and constricts the king of the monsters, but he begins tearing her limbs off and biting down right through her scales. And in a last attempt to defeat the attacking Alpha Titan, uses her frills to suffocate Godzilla, but then he strikes back with his atomic breath, slicing her into pieces, vaporizing her instantly. And then he rose to the surface with one of her arms still in his mouth, which he then threw aside, treating the fight like it was nothing. This is at number 7 because, in reality, it would have been a pretty painless death. Even though she would have been in pain from the tearing of flesh, the kill would have been relatively instant, with the atomic breath burning straight through her skull.
At number 6, we have Silk. When this crustaceous titan ventured outside the water into the land of Rome, Italy, Godzilla came ashore to stop her from destroying his favorite pizza place, and he charged her to engage in battle, throwing her about like she was nothing. Attempts to stop the king of the monsters were futile, as her pincers bounced right off his tough armored skin.
Hey, and let's not forget about the moment where Godzilla even impaled her with one of her own pincers.
She struggled until Godzilla blasted his atomic breath straight through her tentacled mouth, before exploding in a bright display of blood and guts. A truly brutal and gruesome way to go. But once again, would have been pretty instant, with the atomic breath going straight through her exoskeleton skull. One shot, baby.
At number 5, we have the Muto Prime. This titan was featured in Godzilla Aftershock, where it engaged in battle with the king of the monsters in a bid to lay her eggs inside him to begin growing the Muto numbers, just as it did to Dagon thousands of years ago. Godzilla rams her to the ground, using his weight to gain an advantage, but she quickly rises to her feet and the two titans proceed to violently pummel and wrestle with each other. While fighting, the Muto Prime releases a sonic roar so powerful that it shatters some of Godzilla's dorsal plates, which only pisses him off more. Godzilla proceeds to grab and lift the Muto Prime over onto his back before releasing a massive nuclear pulse from his dorsal plates, sending her soaring into the air and causing limbs to individually break off. The Muto Prime falls from the sky and slams back onto the ground, heavily wounded and writhing around in pain. But before she can react, Godzilla crushes her head with a devastating stomp, killing her under the weight of his feet. With his ancient rival finally defeated, Godzilla makes his way back to the ocean, radiating a pure energy cloud from his back. This execution is a brutal one, utilizing his abilities to torch her, sending her flying, breaking off several limbs before crushing her skull and ending her life. Truly brutal, but deserving of that parasite.
At number 4, we have the classic Kiss of Death. In the finale of Godzilla 2014, the female Muto was having a standoff with Ford Brody, the man that destroyed her nest with an explosion. But before she could swipe away the ant-sized pest, she was grabbed by Godzilla that snuck behind her when she looked away and proceeded to pull her back and tear her mouth wide open, claws firmly gripping in her jaw, before he blasted his atomic breath down her throat. And the moments of struggle begin to diminish as we see the life fade from her body. As her head tears off the torso, we see blood spurt out and her spine wriggle around in the wound. which makes for an absolutely gruesome sight, before Godzilla makes his well-deserved victory roar. This one's a classic and well-deserving of the number 4 spot. It began the tradition of the MonsterVerse having these bombastic fatalities, and still remains the most impactful execution of the franchise. But it's not the most brutal. That has yet to come.
Number 3. The Ion Dragon. In Monarch Legacy of Monsters, we spent the whole series waiting for that big action-packed Godzilla fight, and we got it in the finale. Godzilla encounters the flying beast, the Ion Dragon, deep in the Axis Mundi, the realm between the surface and the Hollow Earth. The creature engaged in combat with the King of the Monsters, and it lunged at his face, momentarily knocking Godzilla off balance. But what follows is an unfortunate massacre for this flying creature, because Godzilla proceeds to tear off the claw from the creature's tail, with its greenish blood spewing from the fresh wound. The monster screams in pain, and Godzilla pulls it off him and throws him into the mountain. But it flies straight back and tries to hurt the Alpha Titan, but all it seems to do is lightly annoy him, because he tears and slashes and even cuts through the creature's belly, before letting loose a blast of his atomic breath right to the face. But unlike Tiamat, Scylla and the Muto, it actually survives it. But then Godzilla lifts up the wounded and scorched monster and spins it around, which begins tearing its limbs off, as we hear it screech in agony, before the King of the Monsters throws it into the portal, sending it to who knows where, leaving it to likely bleed out or starve to death, unable to fly or hunt or reproduce, giving it a slow and painful death. A brutal and horrific fight that's well deserving of the number 3 spot.
At number 2 we have the Murder Fish, or specifically the King Murderfish. These monstrous fish showed up in Godzilla Dominion and proved to be a right nuisance for the King of the Monsters. These creatures showed up to congregate in his recently destroyed lair, following the nuking of it in Godzilla King of the Monsters. As soon as Godzilla arrived at his crumbled home, he was ambushed by the King Murderfish, the largest and most deadly of them all. It sunk its teeth into Godzilla, causing great pain, and the smaller fish joined in as well, all controlled by their leader via a hive mind. So how did Godzilla deal with these pests? Well, he plunged his hand deep into the big murderfish and proceeded to tear out its spine from its back, slowly gutting it while it was still alive. During this, the swarm stopped attacking Godzilla and instead began to feast on their leader, whose psychic connection had been severed, and its corpse sank to the depths below. There's no doubt in my mind that this creature suffered through this, despite being a mindless killing machine. This is easily the most metal thing Godzilla has done in the MonsterVerse, straight up making Sub-Zero proud, which makes it well deserving of the number 2 spot.
Fatality.
So who's number 1?
Before we find out, be sure to subscribe and stomp the notification button to become a resident of Dangerville today, to not miss out on everything Godzilla related. At number 1, we have the Devil with 3 heads. In the MonsterVerse, Godzilla has performed several brutal feats, but arguably the most savage and memorable act occurs in Godzilla, King of the Monsters, when he obliterates Ghidorah in their final battle. After a long, vicious fight between the 2 titans, Godzilla, supercharged by the nuclear energy provided by Dr. Serizawa's sacrifice, enters his thermonuclear Godzilla form. In this final confrontation, Godzilla completely decimates Ghidorah, melting away his wings and parts of his body with his overwhelming nuclear energy. This sheds away Ghidorah's flesh and wings and individual heads, letting him suffer for an extended period of time as he feels his body slowly melting away. And the final blow comes when Godzilla caves in Ghidorah's chest by stomping on it with all his weight, crushing his ribs and evaporating the majority of his body as the devil cries in pain. And to add insult to injury, Godzilla bites down on Ghidorah's middle head, then fires his atomic breath directly into it, disintegrating the head from within. As Ghidorah's body has been completely disintegrated, Godzilla roars in triumph. This scene stands out because of Godzilla's primal, almost sadistic display of dominance, ruthlessly annihilating a foe that was once an existential threat to Earth. It showcases Godzilla's raw power and his role as the apex titan in the MonsterVerse, and demonstrates how Godzilla oftentimes wants those foes to suffer and understand the true meaning of the king of the monsters. The MonsterVerse is filled with gory and insane executions, and listed here are some of the best. There are even more featured in the books and comics, though they just don't have the same level of brutality seen here. But do you agree with our list? Let us know in the comment section down below. I cannot wait for the next film to see how Godzilla brutally unalives the next titanic threat. Don't forget to subscribe and stomp the notification button to become a resident of Dangerville today. And give this video a big old Kong-sized thumbs up. I've been Alistair, and we'll see you residents in the next one.